Perfect. So I think we're all in for today. So thank you so much, everyone, for joining. Hello and welcome. Thanks for joining us on today's live webinar, Cloud Security versus Flexibility, Why Choose When You Can Have Both. I'm Kay Lincoln, and I'll be your host for this session. We're excited to dive into this important discussion on how Ververica's Bring Your Own Cloud approach gives you the best of both worlds, security, flexibility, and without any compromise. Our presenter today is Igor Kursik, Head of Product at Ververica, who will walk us through the benefits of BYOC and how it enables enterprises to deploy workloads securely in their own cloud environments. After this presentation, we'll have a Q&A session to conclude. If you have any questions during the session, feel free to drop them in the chat or the Q&A panel. We'll be sure to cover all questions. Also, a recording of this session will be sent to all registrants by the end of the week, so no worries if you have to step away at any point. With that ado, let's get started. Igor, over to you.
All right. Okay. Thank you so much. So I'll welcome all the participants. I'm Igor Kursik, Head of Product, Ververica. So without further ado, I will open this webinar. So what we are going to talk about, we are going to lay out some cloud solution challenges first, leading us to actually trying to tackle a security dilemma with the Bring Your Own Cloud model. Then we'll see what changes are driving this new model appearance on the Zero Trust paradigm. Then we'll go and shortly see different approaches for Bring Your Own Cloud implementations or architecture approaches. And then we'll go through a series of questions and answers through the design journey that a vendor needs to undertake. So let's start with challenges of cloud solutions. So it's kind of historically laid out. It started with the opportunity on the cloud brought by cloud solutions. Basically, it started mostly with the opportunity with being elastic. So businesses could be asking resources elastically, and vendors would have shared infrastructure, fully managed, so they would benefit on the economics of scale. Businesses would have on-demand self-service. So this is how it all started. And that was an opportunity leading to next set of challenges, because the CapEx was essentially replaced by OpEx problems. So the next wave was focusing on the cost optimization, expenditure, like I said, went to operational. Things like saving plans were introduced, etc. As we went along to this cloud native or cloud services, software services journey, next wave of problems came, or challenges that were led by tight compliance requirements. So essentially, security, regulatory standards, monitoring standards, best practices, legal requirements. In newer era, so to say, this cloud landscape expanded. There were multiple hyperscale vendors offering different type of cloud models as well, public, hybrid, private. But mostly businesses were actually taking different steps. Business applications were taking different steps in cloud native transformation journey. Some parts having slower evolution, some faster. There, the business application landscape was spread across a lot more cloud vendors and a lot more cloud models. So this increased cloud landscape complexity. Lately, however, threat landscape evolved. Increased threat of cyber attacks emerged, and this essentially introduced zero trust paradigm in the last 5 or 6 years. So as we can see from this historical layout, now businesses have a combination of kind of dilemmas, how to ensure balance between efficiency, flexibility, and security when choosing an application vendor. It needs to be balanced. So in this webinar, we will touch upon all three subjects in kind of implicit way, but explicitly we will do major focus on a security dilemma when choosing your software as a service or application vendor. So let's see about the security dilemma as we go along. So first of all, like I said, I'm going to introduce the change led to basically choosing maybe a new model in SaaS portfolios. So yeah, this is very well-known kind of architecture simplification of a traditional setup, where on the left side you would have a software as a service or infrastructure service, platform as a service, third-party vendor, which is basically behind the firewall, exposing its services to a user or business. And traditionally, this was done by businesses expanding their corporate network trust here, and everything sitting behind the firewall. The point of this slide is that the traditional connectivity was relying on the expansion of corporate trust by expanding your trusted, protected network domains. However, today, what we see more is that there is a need to have a global interconnectivity, basically application, critical infrastructures, users, and vendors as well need to be connected from anywhere, essentially. So there are multiple factors that are bringing these trends. Like I said, cloud adoption rates, so different application, different stages of cloud native transformation, but most importantly, business use cases within a company. And also remote hybrid working as well. And not to forget advances in the public global connectivity, right? So in essence, what this means is that the consequences of this new trend is the connectivity today demands it's global and demands connectivity over public internet, so to say. Well, another representation of the interconnectivity complexity is you would have a business that is not only spreading over private data center or having critical infrastructure on premise, but businesses, due to different reasons, being mostly cost-driven, would actually use different hyperscaler providers or different SaaS providers, and they would be connecting to the multi-cloud, so to say. There will be obviously a lot more happening on the defensive perimeter in each of these cloud solution where the businesses spread their application. So this picture is essentially saying that the businesses do not require only one cloud vendor this today, but multiple clouds, and not only public, but private and hybrid. And what you need to take from this picture is that this network parameter defense is basically morphing. So it's not easy just to protect your application within a single hyperscaler or data center, because they are spread for many reasons that we already mentioned. Then there is, like I said, something that is evolving, especially last, I don't know, 5 years or something. The security breaches are becoming more common. So from left to right, we can see an intruder or a trusted partner or vendor over global connectivity reaching into your corporate domain over the public or global firewall. a global firewall. Traditionally, this kind of perimeter defense was assured with demilitarized zone, or here semi-trust, no trust zone, where you would have, again, an internal kind of firewall, where you would have a private trust zone where businesses would run their applications. However, this doesn't actually, this is all laid out on the trust from for the vendors, partners that are using your private trusted zone, essentially. However, the intruders are getting more sophisticated, and the breaches are more often. So the consequences would be that the intruder, when already in private and trusted zone, if the intruder takes the credential, basically it can take all of your data. It could not, it's not only malicious attacker, but like I said, it could be a trusted vendor or even an employee. So what to take from this slide is that assuming a fully trusted zone is risky. Rather, assuming a breach will happen is more correct in the new era. So that's all fine and dandy, right? But yeah, what actually businesses did over the years, they invested a lot in security and infrastructure, right? So you have your deal with hyperscaler vendors, really nice deals, and the security is already built. So on the other side, this changes in cyber security threat landscape brought the rise of the so-called zero trust paradigm, where you don't trust, always verify. But time-wise, it's pretty, newer concept. So the problem that businesses face now is that the zero trust paradigm needs to be built on top of current investment, whether it's cybersecurity investment or just simply infrastructure investment. And then a vendor needs to make sure with their zero trust implementation to fit this cybersecurity zero trust roadmap. So it's basically evolution, not revolution. So with this in mind, I will go into next slide, trying to bring the answer to this dilemma with all these challenges laid out. So obviously, the approach to solve our dilemma is a new model called Bring Your Own Cloud. May be known to some of you. So the positioning of Bring Your Own Cloud is between completely self-managed offering from the vendor and self-service. So essentially on the self-managed part of the spectrum, you have deployment option that is software only, completely managed by a customer or a business in the air-gap environment. And there is a shipping in the fixed cadence of releases. These self-managed instances are decoupled from one another, but they're actually missing all the benefits of fully managed cloud on the right side, where you have self-service model, low or no touch management. Pay-as-you-go model is not possible. Then unified pane of glass. Then you would have streamline patching and delivery across multiple cloud and regions, etc. So, however, self-service model, this fully managed SaaS model, brings all these benefits, but opens a dilemma of data governance, where the businesses actually needs to rely on the third-party security processes, right? The third party offering this self-service. Also, the observability is also in the hand of self-service vendor as well. So basically, full trust toward this vendor needs to be extended because you're using application in completely fully managed by a third-party vendor domain. So bring your own cloud deployment model lies in between and tries to tackle best of the both worlds. So let's see how it goes further. The bring your own cloud model implementation essentially has no de facto standard today. So there are different ways how to approach bring your own cloud model implementation. So one thing immediately to notice on the bring your own cloud architecture model is there is always a control plane owned by a vendor that provides you a services, software service or application on the left side, and there is always some kind of an agent that represents vendor control plane into a completely owned bring your own cloud data plane. So the data plane is always owned by business or customer, while the control plane is on vendor, and then you have an agent, right, that represents vendor within customer cloud. So the first type of implementation could be kind of traditional, where you have network perimeter trust model, where you essentially you repeat the same model that we showed before. You have demilitarized zone, and then the agent sits there and basically issues the command toward the private and trusted zone. This model has the same pitfalls that we explained when we laid out the challenges earlier. More advanced model, however, is yet another model that uses cross-account roles provided by hyperscaler vendors, right? So this is basically using cross-account roles where the vendor cloud account over the agent actually pushes commands with cross-account roles over your cloud in the trusted zone and issues the commands and controls their application. This inherently has a couple of flaws. The operational governance is not essentially in the customer control and business control, because agent pushes the commands from one cloud account to another cloud account. And this cloud account on the left side is vendor cloud account. Also, agent in this model uses static cross-account roles, which are basically more prone to attack and breaches. The newer model of bring your own cloud were more on agent basically pulling the command from control plane, and yeah, that's kind of a new model that is more pull based. However, if a vendor on the left side decides to control much more like networking, storage, etc., this basically becomes a problem of elevated privileges. So these are kind of traditional bring your own cloud challenges, or the models that exist in the ether. So in order to see how we approach bring your own cloud model, we'll start with simple questions and provide the answers as we go along on how we made, or how would this bring your own cloud zero trust driven model be implemented. So the first question is obviously, how do you provide self-service across globally distributed data plane? Well, it's rather simple. Like I said, the vendor cloud would have a control plane, and the customer cloud, your business cloud, would have data plane where the vendor would run their offering, right, or services. Second and the third question get a bit tricky, because the question is, who owns metadata and where does it live, the metadata, and who owns more particularly data, where the data governance issue arises. Where does it live? So to answer this question, you need to implement the model, bring your own cloud that is actually compliant with the data governance rules of zero trust paradigm. You need to have metadata in the vendor cloud, controlling only the metadata, right, of the application services, while on the data plane, owned by customer, is where you do everything, like the customer owns storage. This is where you do processing, and this is where you do network movement. Like I said, this is where the data processing and the data movement happens inside of the customer cloud, not between the clouds. So let's dive a bit deeper. This is kind of simplified model, starting with some zero trust design principle. This is based on the National Institute of Technology publication 800-27, I think, where the references to zero trust architecture was done. It was written in 2020. So on the left side, we can see a third party, which is a vendor actually providing services. And all these boxes where the are essentially not green, and they are in hands of the customer or the businesses. Like so the question, who controls vendor custom connectivity policies? The answer would be the customer. Who controls the data access policies? The answer is again the customer, the business. And once again, the data storage control should be in hands of the customer. There is also observability points mentioned in this zero trust architecture publication, and the observability points or observability should be in complete control again of the customer or the business, not the vendor. So that said, how do you do that from high perspective? So the answer to who controls vendor customer connectivity policy, where the vendor actually connects to the customer cloud, this is where you have to make your first choice, where the agent is essentially the vendor agent is in the customer cloud and initiates connection as a client to vendor cloud. This agent maintains a secure outbound only connection to vendor cloud. That means that customer has a full control of the agent as a client, which means customer can apply any other restrictive policy which the business or the customer owns. Who controls the data access policy as the data? Again, it's in the hands of the customer. So it's kind of grayish here, and the policy of the access is grayish. And how to give full observability on all levels? It starts with attaching your observability mechanisms to the agent, but we'll see more how actually we would implement pool-based observability. In the zero trust paradigm principles, there is a lot mentioned least privileges principle. So I tried to depict it on the right side with the pyramid, where you have the bigger the access privileges, the bigger is the trust service you have to give to your vendor. So the real questions you have to ask yourself with building bring your own cloud model is, how much should vendor control in customer stack? The answer is obviously the least as possible, and the control should be given to the service on the service level. If you give control to the vendor for your container as a service or Kubernetes clusters or your network and storage domains, security groups, or whatever, you're basically building expanding the trust perimeter, and you cannot actually give trust on the service level because now you are on L4 and L3 level on the infrastructure, for example. So it's hard to actually have micro-segmented privileges. So how do we ensure least privileged design? You design your bring your own cloud to have privileges on this level, on the service level. And of course, the question who owns observability and other auxiliary system, we already answered that it should be in the custom hand. So that's nice, but let's see how this is basically designed in a bit more detail. So on the left side, you would have a control plane of bring your own cloud vendor. On the right side, you would have your data plane completely in your cloud, in custom business cloud. And then the question, how to ensure least privileged design, you essentially need to decide to make your model so your vendor bring your own cloud only deploys microservices within existing infrastructure. So these microservices should fit without any elevated privileges into existing Kubernetes environment. By the way, Kubernetes is a de facto industry portability standard for cloud native application. So there is an assumption there is always a Kubernetes cluster already there and running. So essentially, if you go with the approach that your cloud native services fit whatever exists there, Kubernetes namespaces, infrastructure, any kind of virtual machine or network domain, and just fit together with your existing applications, then you would actually solve this design dilemma. So no elevated privileges to ask from your Kubernetes teams or infrastructure as a service teams. On the observability, like I said, you can design observability and monitoring from this vendor cloud, bring your own cloud microservices by actually pushing or even bringing your observability stacks with you, or pushing your metrics toward the observability stack of a customer. But this is what where you would require, again, elevated privileges. So you need to design your microservices to essentially be scraped for metrics. Yeah, so it can be pool and portable kind of monitoring. That means that, again, you are compliant to least privileges design. Okay, so going a bit deeper, zero trust paradigm principles introduce a bit more questions you need to answer. So how do you actually ensure security breach isolation? This simple picture shows a service communicate with a data point, and another service communicate with data point, and if there is a breach in the line above, the breach is not cascaded to this line or to this data point, right? To this tenant, so to say. You need to ensure this implementation-wise. Then again, who owns the authorization and authentication services? The best ownership is actually should not bring your authentication authorization services. They should be taken from whoever is building them the best, which will be your cloud vendor, right? Then how to ensure identity-based authentication as well. Quite important thing is how do you ensure that your authorization is dynamically refreshed, so there is no exposure to get your authorization tokens and there is no breach. And then at the end, if you remember your data access policies, how would you ensure granular access control to your data? So you essentially have the calls on your data storage which are really needed at the end, right? So this is this is the approach in kind of high level. So how to ensure security breach isolation? Well, it's obvious that if you have a tenant A in your data plane, the customer environment, if the tenant A and tenant B are services for your tenant A and tenant B in your business unit A or business unit B would have completely separated vendor, bring your own cloud vendor service chain, right? The chain starts with separate agents for each tenant, then goes and has completely separate service level authorization chain. And of course, you would need to implement your authentication. So it would be dynamic and ephemeral, essentially refreshing the token. And at the end, to ensure granular access to object storage data bucket, you need to have a granular access on the API level, or exactly what the vendor service would do. So how do you ensure authentication authorization service? Like I said, that's already been said. So the one thing that I want to mention here is that the authentication authorization services need to be, and the access policy to the storage needs to be not generic. The hyperscaler or your implementation of these services is the best practice services. So you cannot avoid this level of lock-in essentially, or because this is the security best practice. If you go generic here, you're basically not using the best of what your cloud provider does. So this is obviously something that needs to be cloud vendor specific, right? The identification, IAM policies, right? Yeah. So that's isolation, dynamic rotation of the authentication, and granular access to that data storage. So what does it mean for Zero Trust Bring Your Own Cloud? For us, basically, it enables multi-cloud, hybrid, distributed Flink job pipelines under Zero Trust policies, while keeping our Flink processing locally to the customer cloud ecosystem. So there is no hindering of the latency goals. You basically run your Flink job close to your data. One thing that is quite important with the Bring Your Own Cloud, as you run your Flink jobs pipelines close to your data, you obviously leveraging proximity to these data sources and syncs. So it's basically preventing lateral data movement across clouds. Then obviously that, well, what we already said, if you're running microservices and Flink jobs in your cloud environment under your rules, they can comply to the same security and compliance policies. Yeah, and then allowing platform microservices observability and transfer encryption is obvious, right? For us in Ververica, to repeat, that was Bring Your Own Cloud model can be, or this implementation model can be generally applied to any kind of platform. Stream data processing platform is just one of the examples, and we hope that the model would be more standardized as we go along. So for us, the Zero Trust Bring Your Own Cloud for our Ververica unified streaming data platform obviously brings globally distributed and managed real-time streaming processing in Streamhouse. We have that data movement proximity as well. Like I said, without lateral movement, so it gives a lot of advantage not using a public networking for transfer of data. We have localized stream processing in the customer cloud, so we can bring essentially our cloud native engine Vera and all our platform microservices together with agent and proxy into customer clouds and get all these nice things that we have with Bring Your Own Cloud, like operational excellence, development efficiency, multi-tenancy, etc., with a single pane of glass. And that was it. Thank you for listening. I don't know if like how many minutes did I talk? So yeah,
No, that
thank
was
you so much.
perfect. Thank you so much, Igor, for that insightful presentation. It's so great to see how BYOC is changing the market, especially with the power with Ververica's unified streaming data platform, allowing full maintain of control over their infrastructure. We've had some really great questions come through throughout your presentation and your talk. So let's move to the Q&A panel and answer those. So first up, we have a question. Hi, Igor. Is the Zero Trust model exclusive to BYOC deployments?
Well, Zero Trust model for Ververica is exclusive for Bring Your Own Cloud deployment model, because we specifically design based on the Zero Trust security model. So essentially, in contrast, the fully managed cloud service may not inherently adopt this Zero Trust architecture. So there are Zero Trust implementation policies, but I would say this is exclusive for Bring Your Own Cloud because it's Zero Trust essentially.
Awesome. And another question from an anonymous user. Hey, thanks. That was an awesome webinar. Can you help me, please? What prerequisites are needed to incorporate BYOC into my cloud infrastructure?
Okay, thanks for the question. Actually, it's a good question because it balances what organization need to operationally maintain. So this kind of balance between Zero Trust and fully managed. So to deploy our Bring Your Own Cloud, you essentially need Kubernetes cluster. Currently, our Bring Your Own Cloud supports EKS in AWS, Elastic Kubernetes Services, the Kubernetes version 1.28, I think it's higher. And then obviously any compute resources would suffice. You need to have virtual machine as well, EC2. From storage perspective, you would need to bring your S3 buckets, object storage buckets, if you remember, for each tenant. Although we can share this, we recommend that each tenant has its own S3 bucket, or each of our workspaces or environment has it. Yeah, and you need to ensure simple that there is outbound traffic to certain endpoints on our side, like APP, Ververica Cloud, that's allowed. And yeah, that's it.
Oh, nice. We've got another question, two actually left. So just to anyone in the audience watching, we're down to 2 questions. So if you have any other burning questions, please drop them in the chat. This is your chance to chat with our expert Igor on this. So the next question we've got is, I use GCP. Can I take advantage of the BYOC deployment in my cloud?
Yeah, this is a great question. And because it brings me to one of the slides that I was telling you about. You cannot build this Bring Your Own Cloud model to be completely portable and generic, because you would break some of the best practices with authentication and authorization mechanisms. So to start with the answer as of the October, I think we went live in November 2024. Ververica Bring Your Own Cloud deployment initially supports AWS infrastructure because we don't want to compromise with these best practices. So we are essentially kind of bind with some implementation parts. However, plans are in place to expand this to other major cloud providers, starting with Azure, and then GCP in parallel as well, Google Platform. And in the future, we want to, in the future, essentially after that, we want to build this to be applicable for any kind of hybrid cloud situation where you would have, I don't know, Dell object storage behind, and if you are doing S3 compatible kind of storage, it would work with your IAM services.
One last question from Chetan. Which area of BYOC architecture causes the biggest concerns for Cisco or security people of enterprise businesses? Or another way to phrase it, which areas create the most discussion or questions from them?
From
And
Cisco.
Chetan, if you have any follow-up questions to Igor's answer, please raise your hand and I can put you on live and you guys can discuss a bit more. Sorry.
Yeah, I
Igor.
can only assume. So what causes the? I think I would I would answer this that essentially controlling virtual private networking and security group. I would consider this as the biggest challenge for the businesses because yeah, we don't want to do that. But basically controlling network domains and uh, network infrastructure as a service resources is something that would cause me great concern if I would be a Cisco domain. But that's maybe a simple answer.
Okay. Thank you so much for that. Any other questions from the audience? I'm just going to do a quick check to see if anyone's raising their hand, which I don't see. But question from Peter says, thank you, this was great. So yeah, I can also speak on behalf of this was a really awesome presentation. Thank you, Igor, so much for presenting to us today and for all of our attendees for joining wherever you are in the world, if it's morning, afternoon, or evening for you. We'll also be sending out a recording with additional resources for you soon, so you can dive into all the good stuff of BYOC. Any further questions that come up, we'll also have a contact link so you can reach out to us. But that's all for today, and have a great rest of your day, and we hope to see you on any future webinars.